Okay, I'm Jack Weber. I live up in Knoxville, Tennessee. We're down here in Chattanooga on a little jamboree, call it our national jamboree. And I've been talking to the fellows about how to learn to fish different water anywhere, and we found some confusion on about what is good structure and how to start and how to go about it. And I'm a rather slow learner myself, so finally I've worked out a method to eliminate or learn how to map and interpret any section of water in any lake in any part of the world. And I have found that what I'll be showing you works every single time. Mr. Perry teaches that if we have a deep cove with 30 or more feet of water depth, that we treat it as a lake within a lake and map it and interpret it as a lake within a lake. I have taught myself so that I can be well disciplined and always do the right thing. I teach myself that any section of water I go to fish, the ocean, the regular lakes, or the reservoirs, the area that I fish, I treat it as a lake within a lake. So we'll draw any bank that you wish to look at on any body of water anywhere, and for whatever reason, here's a good launch wrap. That might be the reason I'm going to fish here this day. My wife might put me and my boat trailer off here and go shopping, and I've only got a short while to fish. I might be here a month fishing, but I have chosen this area for whatever reason, so I treat it as my lake within a lake. I eliminate this section, I lay it out, I fish it. If it's successful, that's fine. If I need to go further, then the next day I'll go further. But we start right here, we launch our boat, and we take off towards the center of the lake, towards where we think is deep water. We're reading our depth sounder, and we go out until we find water 30 feet deep. If we find water 30 feet deep, we turn and head right back in towards shore, reading our depth sounder. I'm now coming back looking for the shallowest break in that area. It can be 10 feet, it can be 14 feet, whatever. As soon as I break from my 30 feet of water and get up to this break line, I drop a marker. I turn around and get out immediately, back to my 30 feet of water, and I proceed down the lake a comfortable distance and turn back towards shore. Whatever distance I can use. If there's a lot of wind, I can't go as far. If there's a lot of boat traffic, I can't go as far. If it's in nice conditions, I can go further, but I turn back in towards the bank. When I get to that break line, I drop a marker. I get right back out, go back down the lake in my 30 feet of water, back into my break line, right back out to my 30 feet of water, right back down till I find my break line. I do this for at least 4 markers. 6 is better. I turn, and my boat path, I go with my depth sounder, I'm reading. I go as close to those markers as I can. I'm on the inside of those markers. If I find a cut or pronounced hump, I drop a marker on it and mark it. If not, I proceed still in a straight line. It must be a straight line to the next marker. If I find a structure, a cut or whatever, I drop my marker and mark it. If I don't, I proceed to the next marker, and I found nothing. This whole trip, I found this can be a quarter of a mile, a half a mile, or it can be a few hundred yards. If I found nothing, I pick this marker up, I pick this marker up, I pick this marker up, I go to this marker, and I go back out to my 30 feet of water, back down turn back into the bank. I'm not looking for humps, bars. I'm looking for nothing but the break line. I go back out and I continue to do this until I put my markers back out to where I have 4 again. As soon as I get my 4th one out, I go in, I run my boat behind the marker, I go to the next marker, and then zip, bam, I find a creek channel cutting through. I drop a marker on either corner of that creek channel, and I go right on forth to my next marker, and I go right on forth to this marker. Now I found nothing except this one between these two. If I had found another one up here, I would mark it for future study. But to simplify this thing, we only found one cut through in this whole area. Now I must analyze this creek channel to see that it goes all the way to the shallows. If this break line, it can be 10 feet, it can be 18 feet, it can be 12 feet, it can be 14, it can be any break line. But as soon as I find this cut, from this break line to the bank is a flat. If this break line is a delta hump situation, then it is oval on top, and when I go over the top of it, then I go down and across the flat. In either case, a fish will not travel from this break line to this shallow water unless he has a path. This path is obvious, very, very easy to see if you go by this very exact situation that I've drawn up. We go back, we can take up, we have taken up these markers, so I have these 4. Now depending on how far apart these markers are, depends on which one I would leave for future trolling. I want to leave a marker out on the deep water side of this break line so that I can troll it later. So let's say that we leave this marker here and pick this marker up. We will take this marker and move it. Now notice I pick this marker up. I have one right here and I have one down here. I never pick up my markers until I've got this creek channel shoulder marked. Remember, we marked one here and then continued on up. So now I can come back and pick this one up because I know this one is on that creek shoulder. I take this one and I move it to this creek shoulder. Now I can pick this marker up and keep it with me, but I leave this one. Now I have a marker here and here for trolling passes in the deep water later on. Now I move back into the shallow water and I start analyzing my creek channel. If the creek channel, if it breaks down and goes to more or less a V and back out, I call that a small creek channel in width, because I can fish. Here is a break line going back, here is a break line going back, and here is a break line going back. If it were a wide creek channel, I would have a wide flat in the bottom of it, and I would have 1, 2, 3, 4 break lines. That's the way I say whether it's a big creek or not. I come back and I start serpentining this creek. When I hit this shoulder, I drop a marker. I go right on up here, and if it's a shallow creek, I go across it, I turn around, I go back across it, and I drop a marker, and this is downstream. All of my markers I drop, if I'm marking one side of the creek, all of my markers are dropped on the same side of that little channel. And I drop mine on the downstream side because the marker will not float over the top of my creek. We go down and drop that marker, and we come back over and we hit the channel right here, say. We go right on up here, and we come back, and the next time we cross our channel might be here. Those little creeks going across that flat are not straight in and straight out. They are very serpentine most of the time. Then I would start fishing this area with my 500. I would let out more line, and I would fish back here with my 500. You can see I've got the creek bleeding out right in here in this area. If it goes more shallow than 10 feet, that is all the way. If it goes to 0, that's fine. If it goes to 8 or 10 feet and stops, that's fine. That's all the way. Now, if it stops off at 8 or 10 feet, my little 500 is not going to reach that depth. So I go out as far as I can touch bottom with my 500, which I say is around 4 feet, 5 feet. I put on my 300. If I stopped off with my 500 at 4 feet, when I put my 400 on, go back up into 3 feet of water, and I serpentine the very same thing. I let my line out and I go back here and I'm starting to pick up the creek. Down here I will put up, I'm out to about 6, 7 feet now. I put on my 250, let out, and I go behind my last pass so that I'm doubling lapping. And I get up and I go right on up with my 250. I make my turn and I let it out until it's bumping the ground real good. It comes to the creek channel, runs free, it crosses the creek channel and picks it back up again. Then I go to my 200 and continue doing the same thing, making sure that I'm crossing the creek every time. I make sure that before I get back, my lure is bumping. I make sure that it bumps off of that shoulder of the channel. I run free, I cross the channel, and it bumps again, and I go on out. I serpentine that creek with different size lures until I get all the way out to my gate or my cut through on my break line. You might be fishing this with a 700, you might be fishing this with a 100, you might be fishing this with a 200. I do not care the depth of this break line for the simple reason it can be anything. I must find that cut if I've got productive structure. Now I've laid this out and found out that it did go all the way, and I got into my fishing passes before I found out if it goes all the way down here. I'm sorry. Before I fished this, I would also check the front and see that it did go all the way. We have a lot of situations where we do have cuts and they only go back for a few feet. They are very productive. They do not go all the way, but a lot of times fish will use them. So we must lay them off in exactly the same manner and find out how far they go, and we must fish them and try them. If they go all the way, they're major. If they go part of the way, I would call them more of a minor, but they both hold fish many, many times. Now when you go to check, you found your gate through your delta hump, you must check to see if it goes all the way. You can find out if it goes all the way by moving out in the lake a few feet off of the break line and running parallel. And you will see that cut going down off of the slope on the bank. If you're having trouble going parallel and seeing it, then go back out into the lake. Remember, we've got a marker here on this shoulder, we've got a marker here on this shoulder. I go out into the lake, below this shoulder I go back in with my depth sounder on. This, we will say, is a 10-foot break line. Then at 15 feet I would come in, or let's say 16 feet, I would come in and I would drop a marker right here. I would move back out into the lake, go above this shoulder marker, come right back in here, and I would drop me a marker right here at 16. Whatever the depth you put these two markers on the side of the slope, you put them at the same footage. I would then go outside and go right down through here with my pass. I can either hit that creek as it goes off, or I can miss it. If I missed it, I come right back up behind my markers and go through, and this time I see it. I would do this and chase it all the way until I got 30 feet deep. 30 feet, that is the normal. 30, 35 feet is the normal sanctuary, and I'm going to drop me a marker at 30 feet. Now, I know that I've got a structure situation that goes all the way to 30 feet deep. If there is 50, a 60, 100, or 200 feet of water below that, I don't worry about that one bit, because I know that most of the time the fish are going to settle down and become comfortable at 30 to 35 feet. If things are so severe, then they will drop deeper. When they drop deeper, the little ones are going to be on the 30 feet. As things get better, the little ones are going back to the shallows, and the big ones are going to normally use the 30 feet. Now you might say, well, Jack, what if I don't have 30 feet of deep water? The deepest water in the lake that you're fishing this day is sanctuary. If it's 20 feet, that's it. In Florida, sometimes it's 12 or 15 feet. That's it. They will be there. If you have the shallower lakes, they use it normally. If you're 20 or 25 feet, they will normally use that as their sanctuary and be comfortable. When things get real severe, they still go to that depth, but they become more and more dormant, and it takes them longer to become active again because they didn't have depth enough to go and be stable and be comfortable. That's the reason in Florida we can have a light cold front, and it affects the fish much, much more than if you've got deeper water, or much, much more if you've got shallow water and a current. The fish just tries to be comfortable, and if you can't get plumb comfortable, then it gets a little bit sick. And it takes longer to get over a stomachache than it does to get over a headache. They're just like we are. Now, when we go back and find these situations and map them out, a good way to fish this situation after you've run your lures, or if it is a small enough creek and narrow enough creek, it's a good idea to have an electric motor with a transducer mounted right on the bottom of it. You can take and vertical jig this with a pig and a jig, Hopkins spoon, a little George, a worm. It makes no difference so long as it's got the weight to fish vertically. You can take that electric motor and set that lure on any 1 inch of space you want to in that whole creek. You can run so close to this break line that you can swing your rod to the right and then hit up on the shoulder. You move it to the left and it'll go plumb down at the bottom of the ditch. Work it plumb out to your shoulders. Run your wire if necessary. Run your drop jigs plumb down your 30 feet, and you have fished this situation. This is any lake within a lake in any body of water in the whole world. Now this is assuming that you have a channel and a break line. If you have this very same situation over on the other side of the lake. If you're going to fish over there tomorrow or the next day when you get over there, for goodness sakes, make that your lake within a lake that day, and you treat that exactly the same as you treated this last week, today, or whenever. You must discipline yourself to say, this is my fishing area today, it's my lake within a lake, I interpret any body of water in the world this exact way, and I'm not lost anymore. If you do not find these, you keep going until you do. There's no point in fishing an area that's dead all the time. If you can eliminate all this dead water and fish in a haphazard manner, you're fishing where you're most likely to catch a fish. That in itself is more productive than you've been in your life before. I can eliminate the bad water and fish only in the good water, then I can accidentally hit one in the head maybe. Okay. Now let me show you. As far as I know, all of your reservoirs have a creek channel, a river channel. The dams were built on them to have water. So the river is just supplying these lakes. So we do have our river channels in on all the reservoirs I know about. And if you have old river channels that have been covered up, then mister, you have got delta humps. And when you find these humps and break lines and lay them out, you can get out in the lake at any point and run across this lake. You're oriented now, and you're going to see your depth sounder. You're out in 30 or deep water. It's going to come up, it's going to reach a crest, and it's going to down on the back side. You have a delta hump. The fish will not go downhill to even see if this is flat or not, if he doesn't have a way through. If it does not have the delta hump and stays level, He will not go past this break line if he doesn't see breaks along the way. In either case, a hump down a river, old river bank, is dead, dead, dead if you do not find a cut that goes to less than 10 feet. Now, we run into your Highlander lakes, you have bars. Those bars, instead of this lowlander situation, this delta situation, this flatland situation, occurs many times up and down a reservoir, a Highlander reservoir. The channel is out towards the center. You might have a delta hump and a flat on each side of that river channel. At times it moves in close to your steeper, deeper banks, and you have no flat or washed out area on the side of the river at all. It's just deep water right straight down, which becomes bars, cliffs, or whatever. So if we're in an area of a lake where we have bars, now I use my land sightings and everything to see my productive water and all, but when I go to fish it, I'm not worried about the bank. The fish aren't on the bank. They're out in the water. So I've got to start analyzing my water. Today, if we're going to fish an area that has Highlander, it's a Highlander, and you have lots of bars that go all the way out, and they go all the way down, plumb down into the river channel. There is no floodplain on this side of the lake. I put in right out here because that happens to be where the launching ramp is. I go right out till I find deep water, always to 30 feet if it exists, always to 30 feet if it exists. I turn my boat and I go back straight in towards shore. Now in this case we do not have a break line. We have no delta hump. The bar just goes all the way to the deep water. I go in until I reach a 15-foot depth. I move back out to my deep water and I move in. Notice I'm moving out to my deep water. I'm not worried about this bank or whatever. And I move in until I get a 15-foot depth. I move back out and I continue to do this until I get out my 4 markers. Now I've drawn this going across a valley. I would start here and go right through here to see if I find a hump, a rock situation, a stump situation, whatever. I have no break line. All I have here is a depth. And I go across here to see if there's any unusual creeks or anything unusual. I go back out here in the same way to see if I find something unusual. Well, now for the purpose of this talk, I find nothing unusual here. There are times when there are good creek beds or whatever in this area. But we want to learn how to troll a bar. I pick up these markers, I go back to this marker, I move back out into my 30 feet of water, I start right straight in. When I get to a 15-foot depth, I drop my marker. I go back out, back over, and I go back down till I get in, and I drop my 15-foot marker. And the same thing until I get my markers out. Now I go right through here, and this is quite often is a waste of time really, but I do this, and I see that there's nothing really unusual. The unusual thing is that I have a bar here that's going all the way to the deep water, all the way to 30 foot or deeper. So now I pick these markers up and I have my 4 markers right here. I'm looking for contact points or migration route on the bar. Our contact point and migration route minutes ago, contact point, migration route, migration route. It's a creek channel across a flat. On your bar, you've got a sharp ridge-like bar that goes out here and down. Your migration route is up that sharp part of that bar. To start fishing this, I run my 500s around, and incidentally, you have a very good video that shows exactly this very same thing. 500, 400, 250, 200, 100. You go out here, you put your 100 on, and you come inside your markers. 100. Go around and come back across with your 100. Around and back across with your 100. This is in your classes. You got videos of it. This is nothing more than showing you how you treat your lake within a lake. It works on bars, it works on flats, it works on delta humps, it works on break lines, it works on any body in the world, any body of water in the world. It can be 100 yards long, it can be a quarter of a mile long, it can be a mile long. For goodness sakes, treat it as a lake within a lake. Don't even dream about the other side, because you're not there today. And I told my boys that went out with me in classes here, you fish an area for some reason. Guys, you're right here looking at this situation because you're in my boat and you don't have a choice. So whatever reason you're there, be it the best fishing water in the world, treat it like this. You've got discipline and you can do it every single time. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. I'll just go ahead and keep on talking.
Come on. The reason I drew this bar, there's a real good video out on this bar. It shows Mr. Perry how he makes his trolling passes the whole way, and then he goes back and he overlays his video with the trolling passes and dots them in, and it's real instructive. It's a lot better job than we're doing here. I wanted to impress on you here is to be sure that whatever area of water you're in, that is your lake within a lake. If you find no cut through, no structure, nothing that goes all the way, you just continue down the lake. It is a learning, teaching process. Now, this will find you all kinds. It will find the productive structural situations. It does not find the fish. And a part of mapping and interpreting is running the lures on these productive structural situations. Strain the water with your lures, and you're going to get the fish on there even if it's by accident. You will get the fish, but a part of mapping and interpretation is running the lures. This just helps you to get your lures in the good water first. Your lures run properly through any area of water will find these areas, but it takes so much longer than using this method right here. Incidentally, we have a real good spoon plugger out of Indiana. And a place down our lake right here is a real productive place. And there's a cut through coming off the Delta hump that's only about, it's a little less than 30 feet deep, they tell me. But it's a nice dead-end creek that has fish in it just lots and lots of times. And a gentleman went down there looking for it and couldn't find it. I said, well, I can tell you just exactly how to find that. It's all you've got to do is be a boat length off, and you don't see the thing. 25 feet is just one color. It's one color on your mono. You turn your boat around and you've gone more than that distance. And if you're serpentining that break line, if you're going out and back in, you miss that little creek completely for the simple reason it's just such a small area. So we went over to the map and showed him, you've got an area on the lake here, and it turns in, comes out. This is the break line, and the bank goes down way over here, and a gentleman's dock, I forget his name, he's got a dock right there. And this little cut goes right back in about this area right here, just like that. It might be where a barge gouged in at one time or other and on around the channel. The channel is right here. And after we talked about that, they suspected that might be exactly what it is. He tried to find this and couldn't. This is a flat. The bar goes on around and down this way, and there's also good fishing in this area down here. But this is real hot at times. I said, well, if you will go right in and right on that break line, drop you a marker. You come right back here and you go in, and right on that break line, you drop you a marker. Come out here and go in and drop you a marker. You come out here and go in and drop you a marker. Now you might say, Jack, what if you go right up here? Well, hooray, you don't have to worry. You get right behind here, you're dropping it right on that break line. You know that it's only 25 or 30 feet back in there, so you must be exact. In this case, we're looking, this is our lake within our lake, if you want to call it that. But now we're trying to locate a specific break, a specific creek that other guys have caught fish on, and we want to help him. So this is exactly the way to find it. This guy's a real good spoon plugger, but he couldn't find it. If you go back in here and do this, if he don't find it now, he never will.
Now, how far back, what was the depth at the end of that?
This is around 14 feet.
There.
This depth here, as I remember him saying, was around 14 feet. And this right here, this indentation is like only about 2 feet deep.
But it did go up into...
It did not go all the way. It was a notch back in there
That's
for
why I was
about
wondering.
25 feet.
It didn't go up to the 8 to 10 foot then.
No, this did not go all the way. But it went back in here, and let's say back in here might have been still 12 feet deep or something. It goes a little bit more shallow, but it does not in any case go all the way. But remember, in our lessons, Mr. Perry says oftentimes you find cuts in your break lines that do not go all the way. The fish do use them. They have no intentions of going all the way. It might be your spawning area can be down here somewhere, and when they go into their summer pattern, they move away from the spawning area, and they will use places like this maybe a whole summer long. They have no intentions, and maybe you've got the bluff up here where they spend their winter time, which is absolutely exactly what's down here on this situation. You've got a spawning area around in here. You've got a spawning area over on this side of the lake. There's a big bluff right here, and that break line goes right up, straight up down against the bluff, and then moves right around here. The guy's dock is here, and that little cut's there. And the more you look at it, and the more you think about it, and the more you realize that's quite possibly where a barge gouged in at some point in time. But it's there, it's hot, you can find it, but it isn't easy. You know, these guys found it by being persistent, by running their lake within a lake situation, by their discipline. They did find it. But this situation right here, this makes it so easy. Man, as dumb as I am, if I can find it, anybody can.
Was talking to me, but I had my line sights, and I was just following that song.
Kenny was right behind him.
I'm gonna start practicing them line sights.
Oh, that's the whole.
And I showed him how when we put out the markers on the break, you get behind it and you go in a straight line. And I showed him how if you're coming up on the break line and back out, it looks like you're in a creek channel. It gets shallow, deep, shallow. And I can make the prettiest creek channel you ever saw on the side of a drop-off, just by zigzagging the boat.
That's what you're talking about.
That's what he was doing. He was seeing all kinds of humps and valleys, and probably the thing was plumb straight.
Man, this don't even look nothing like that daggum map.
But it's there now.
Yeah.
And a funny thing, I had this creek area down there that goes all the way, and it's still a creek at 30 feet exactly. Well, I know how to miss it. And I'm laying my markers. Well, I laid them above this time, and I was going to work more with these two guys because they stayed over on Sunday and waited on it. And so I was going to start way around on Pinky's Point to show them how to miss everything and keep it going until finally we work our way till we find something. So I'm going up through there shooting a breeze, and I've laid out my 4 markers, and I'm going right behind them, and I go from the last one I put out to the next one, absolutely nothing. Just a straight line up on top of that building. Going past the next one I'm talking.
That's like me running the 15 feet contour.
15-foot contour, except this was down there 17, 18 feet.
Yeah.
So was talking and I was telling him, and I showed him, darn, he saw a creek right there. Up there, that wasn't even the one I was looking for. But it was just plain as day.
Yeah.
But it would have been a minor. It did not go. It was like a, you know, you talk about
Dead end.
It's a dead end.
Yeah.
But you know they use it so many times.
Yeah.
And this thing right here, right? You know, there's a ditch right there out from a fellow's dock way around the corner. And frankly, they catch fish here all the time. So your buddy from Indiana went down and tried to catch it. He couldn't find it. Couldn't find it. I said, well, if you go right in here, put your marker. Go in here, drop your marker. Go in here, drop your marker. Go in here, drop. Right on the edge of that. See, this thing is only 25 feet back in here. He would find it. He would find it. Frank showed it to me, but I didn't find it because I've never found it on a sounder myself. I've seen it, and it's only about, I think it's less than 2 feet deep. And it's just, they say it's just about 25 feet long, but they catch a lot of fish on it.
Yeah.
And this was the same.
It's a nice looking spot there.
It is.
That'd be the same situation.
This right up here on Pinky's Point, where you found that one right there, this one is the one we were working, Mr. Perry. It goes all the way, I think it goes all the way down to that 30-foot shell. But there's a little one right here. And it just barely cuts through that delta. And I know it's just like this. But it would have fish on it sometimes, maybe. Trolling would.
I've seen some structure situations that I find fish on, and then I keep going back that thing, keep going back that thing, and never show again on that structure. Then this is in Pennsylvania, and I said I was busy, didn't have time, but one day I had time, and I said these fish had to come from somewhere. And I finally found a brake line that they were using. I kept following that brake line, and I went down, oh Lord, I beat up to half a mile. And it went through a culvert.
Well, I will swear.
Through a culvert over on the other side.
To the deep water.
Yeah.
What about it?
And it just happened, maybe conditions were such that maybe weren't there 5 years. That they come through that culvert and migrate that far.
Well, that's exactly what I told these fellas, except I didn't say 5 years. I tried to say most of the time where that creek cuts through and you come up to that 17, 18-foot break, especially the summer season, that's as far as they're going to go.
Yeah, they won't
They won't. They'll live there. If it's real good and all, they'll go back, and in the springtime, they'll definitely go back.
Oh, yeah.
But it all depends on how stable. How good.
It sometimes if it's unstable, some structure situation that will produce eventually, and it'll be a long time before they hit it if it's unstable weather.
And I believe Danny said something about why wouldn't you just fish the deep structure? And I said, it's just as big as sand. Mr. Perry says it's just as big as sand to fish under the fish as it is to fish above them. And then, you know what I told him about? I told him about Grenada and them 7-pounders on a 500.
Yes,
and we did not get a single fish on a 250, did we?
No, sir. No, sir.
You could get them on, you get most of them on a 500 and some on the 400. And when you got down to 200, you didn't get that.
Yeah, I've got that tape. I keep looking at it.
And you should.
That lure,
You
that
just,
big, that bass that long.
yeah, and it was just a 1 or 2 fish. Holy cow.
Lots of them.
It was a lot of them. And I've hit that situation. And I would often say in 1948 or 49, I can limit out. I'm talking about from a yearly standpoint now. That season, I could limit out on a 500 from Florida to the Canadian border.
What about it? Just a
That's
good
the
year.
only year I remember, and I can figure on my hand, 2 hands, in the last 40 years, the good years the migration occurred. That shows you that weather conditions will mess up a day, a week, a month, or a year. They'll do it.
And that 1 year can mess up the spawn season for 3 or 4 months.
Oh, I'll see. I saw it mess up. I saw it mess it up for 12 years in Fontana.
Yeah,
12
yeah,
years
yeah.
of Montana. It messed it up. Spawning season. Didn't even spawn.
Just kidding. Messed up the fishing for 12 years.
It messed up all reproduction and movement and everything. Didn't get a spawn for 12 years.
Oh, hey.
You know, I've seen it up north in Chicago where I was working there. And the bass beer on the beds, weather change, they never came back. I've been in when went back, I'd find them out on the end of the bar, and after they'd gone, and I'd come up on the end of the bar and I'd put them in a boat and it'll egg drop out of them. They'd already been on the beds. They hadn't laid the eggs yet, but the beds were made, and the weather changed on them. They sent them
They
back
went back.
deep water, and they
Never
never
went
came back.
Okay.
I caught them out there, and I was really tested. And the eggs, the temperature had come up in such a way I pulled them in, they just fell out of them.
Hey.
So as I say, you can fish a lake, any lake in the world, and catch a lot of fish. Spoonpluggers, an older body can show this. It'll be 1 or 2 gaps in there that there's no spawn. You'll have a lot of, or you may for 3 or 4 years you only got just a few this age group. And then all at once you got a big age group. And then I've seen an age group down here 1 year, and I go through all these years, these age groups, 1, 2, 3 year, 4 year, 5 year, 6 year, pretty good. And I've seen years absolutely blank, none.
Oh, hey.
And that's from Canada
Besides,
to
that's
Florida.
where you get a range. You got some small ones, and then they over to this, going up to a bigger piece, and they nothing in there.
Nothing in between them. No, absolutely none. And I've been in lakes now that was completely fished out, and there was only one group. Now, I found a lake up in, I forget where it was. Oh yeah, it was in Illinois, and in Chicago, greater area. And I fished that far, and it said there was no reproduction, which was true. I didn't catch, and I worked the lakes hell. I didn't catch a small year. I didn't catch any fish. And I finally found a school of between 5 and 5 3/4 pounds. Absolutely. There was no age group below that.
What about it?
And I found that this is the last group. And that from then on, that's the end of their lifestyle, so to speak. That summer, we took over 800 out of that school. It was fished out there. There was no reproduction. Now it's come back a little bit since then. But I need the 800 in order to do my promotion in the greater Chicago area. That's where I took these guys and just shook them up. Johnny and Lee talked about it yesterday. I found this one school. Instructor, boys that never found it. And so when I did a article with a guy on one lake, the writer of the Chicago Tribune, he wrote this thing up. It just shocked him what he saw, so he wrote it up. And the Chicago Tribune got a lot of static from it. It's a bunch of lies. So the boss, Tom McNabb's boss of the Chicago Tribune, I said, "You're calling me a liar and you calling Tom McNabb a liar. You got to go and let me show you something." And he agreed to go. And so I made a thing. I put him in my boat, and I got Johnny Boy and another guy and my son in the other boat. So that gave me 2-5. So I told Johnny and Reed, I told Johnny, who was running that boat, I said, "Now you stay over in that area. Now when I give you the high sign, you come run it. Because you got to help me keep these fish in the frenzy." And so when I hit the first fish on the troll, I had it all lined up. And when I hit the fish on the troll, and I'm going back to anchor, I gave the boys the high sign. Here they come. I said, anchor right there. So we started. And every time I read, my son would get one, you hear my rebel yell come halfway to Chicago. And we had those fish coming at something tough. We caught 45 big fish before we quit. This guy goes back down and told Tom, says, right in the damn thing you want. That's what I was after.
Right, dude, right.
And he did too.
Did John go on home?
Phyllis had some kind of a beauty queen contest, or he finds those crappy when nobody else does it.
I'm beginning to see that just because you don't fish weeds, you know, that it won't help you. I believe after your lecture that's helped me a whole lot, just watching you on that, doing that last night, you know, Saturday night, and all that, and I can relate that to a lot of things that I've been doing.
Yeah.
Or not doing?
They're not doing.
When you can relate it to the things you're
Well,
not
what
doing.
you do is don't worry about the weeds, because I gave you the guidelines, and you do that, and it'll keep you out of problems. And if you want to catch a fish, that's the best way to do it, really, the weeds.
Oh, incidentally, somebody told me that, see, they told them you've got to be bumping that lure on the bottom below 10 feet to catch fish. But in my lake, it's covered with weeds, and if I try to bump the bottom, then I'm tangled up all the time. I said, no, wait a minute. And I told them about your straight lining, and you let your lure out till you're on the top of the weeds. And, you know, just tipping the top of the weed. And I said, then that is more or less like you're bumping the bottom. You're hitting and triggering the fish.
Yeah, well, I'll put it another way too. It's a lot of muck. You can't work the bottom. It's a lot of moss you work with. But if you read carefully, you just try to bump if you can. If you can't, get as close as you can. Now, I should go even farther and say this. When you're downstairs, where you can't work the bottom due to debris, moss, muck, or soft sand, or mud even, the guy that's going to catch the most fish is the guy that controls his lure the closest to the bottom. And that's the reason the women beat the beach sometimes in Florida, because they're up there and they're taking in line, they're letting out line and getting close. If they let out too much, they got it out of muck, clean it and get it right good, just right above the muck.
Just like I was telling somebody, I said, you get on a road bed, we were standing right there, I said, you get on a road bed and you let your lure down and get it the right depth, and you would be hitting that road bed all the way up through there. No. There's no high places where you can hit it and trigger it. What would you do? I'd let my rod down. When it hit it, I'd lift it up. As soon as it got off, I'd let it back down. I'm going on, beep, 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 beep.
You're using the rod tip. That's why I tried to
We do that on
I was trying
riprap,
to
right?
get him down there in that tape I made against riprap. Same deal.
Same deal.
Does that work with all sizes and all that?
Yeah, because what you're doing, you're actually pulling up and less line in the water, and you're shortening the amount of line back, and the amount of line is going to control the depth. So you just pull, you got some line out. See, you haven't got as much line out, and you're holding it up, and you're getting back there, and you're lifting the lure. And so you'd be amazed how much you can change it just by raising the tip. But what you're doing, you're trying to keep it as close as possible. You're not raising a great distance.
No.
But you want to hit the top of the rock, so if you're bumping too hard and you're going to hang up, you just raise the rod tip a little bit, and if you change it that much, you get in the clear.
Then ease it back
And
down.
then ease it back down. That's a good word.
You jerk it off as soon as it starts hitting you. Get it
Well,
off
that's what
quick.
I've been doing
Then
wrong.
ease it back down slow.
I just been plopping it back down.
No. Oh,
Yeah,
no.
you get home. You got to
No,
ease
No,
it
when
back
you
down.
drop it, that plug gets its
You
dip
got to
immediately, don't it?
ease it back down. Yes, sir.
As soon as it tips one or two, get her back up. And you
Excuse me.
never hang up.
You guys stand to have hot dogs tonight? We're gonna go out and buy some and have